This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So please grab whatever sweet beverage that will give you some pleasure during this next hour, and thank you for spending time with Charlie and me. In our first half, we have our recipe of the week, and Charlie's going to talk about a Spanish road trip reported in the international news.
Oh.
In the third,
I look forward to that.
In the second half, I'm going to talk a little bit about pet doulas. And in the third half, we have an interview with Lucy Morganstern, who's a pet doula who lives in New York City.
New York City.
So since we're talking about pets at the end of life, I thought we should have a recipe for our sweet little pets while they're still alive.
You don't mean they're the main ingredients, do you?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
No.
Well, that's good.
No.
It's like,
No.
All right.
Just treats for the dog, not treats of the dog.
Got it. All right.
So a simple sweet potato dog treat recipe is 1 sweet potato, 2.5 cups of whole wheat flour, 1/4 cup of unsweetened applesauce, and 2 eggs. And mix it together and follow the recipe on the website, and you get little dog treats.
Yeah.
And
Hang on, let me write that down. I want to make sure I got those instructions correct.
I make dog treats. I use like a whole container of yogurt and throw that in a blender, a banana, throw that in a blender, and a big old scoop of peanut butter. Throw that in the blender and blend it up. And then I put it in little muffin trays, like small unit dosed, and put in. After they freeze, I pop them out of there and just put them in a baggie. So that's their summer treat, because then they get something really cold with their food and healthy. Yeah. My kids are grown. Can you tell? So if you're the kind of person who loves cats, there's a 3-ingredient cat cookie recipe that's made out of salmon, egg, and flour. Yum, yum. And all of those recipes are on our website. So, Charlie, you were going to tell me about a driver who was found with a corpse on the wrong side of the highway?
Maybe. Well, okay, sure. Why not? We're here. So, actually, yes.
Is this like Weekend with Bernie's, or what's going on here?
In a kind of weird sort of way, I guess, but probably not as funny. So, from the Catalonia region in Spain, a man, and speaking of that, I just returned to my favorite Spanish food restaurant here in the city, Sevilla. Many people criticize it because it's just so much garlic. Yeah, my philosophy with garlic, more please.
There's never too much.
That's it. So there we are. So a little plug for Sevilla. From the Catalonia region in Spain, a man who was stopped for driving on the wrong side of the road was found to have a dead body in the front passenger seat. Police believe the deceased, an 88-year-old man, had been dead for about 3 weeks. They say the driver might have been taking him home to Switzerland. The body, now you see in Switzerland, no, that's, never mind, it's the wrong country. It's, never mind, I'm thinking out loud, ignore me. So anyways.
Well, at least you're thinking, Charlie, so that's a good positive note.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of those doggy and kitty treats, so that's why I just can't see the focus right now. So.
Yeah, you just want this podcast over so you can go get some of those sweet potato and salmon
things. Yes, and now I'm going to have to, to take the time to like, assemble all that. So it's not like I can just go to my refrigerator and, that they're sitting there waiting for me, because they're not. Where was I? Oh, yeah, Switzerland. Well, not me, but the corpse. They say the driver may have been taking him home to Switzerland. The body, believed to be the driver's partner, had started to decompose. It was covered with a blanket and was wearing a seatbelt. It says Spanish newspaper La Vanguardia. Investigators say there's no evidence of criminality. Toll and parking tickets found.
Charlie.
Yes.
I'm impressed that he had his seatbelt on. Safety first. This is important stuff.
It is. It is. Because actually, if you think about it, it was a stiff, so, everything hardened. If there was a sudden slam of the brakes, then, that puppy or big dead man could have gone through the windshield like a missile. Yes.
But after 3 days, he's not in rigor mortis anymore. He's pretty loose.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Oh,
we should do a show about that.
Oh, we should. You know what? Yes. Okay. So wait a minute. So rigor mortis set, because I know the phrase rigor mortis set in, but after it sets in, it like goes away?
Yeah. Oh. Sets in and sets out. Yeah.
Why?
It helps.
It helps when?
No, I'm not going to give no spoiler alerts. I'll do a show about it. It's very interesting. It
is. Now I'm intrigued. So but as it started to, where was that? Oh yeah, the decomposing body. So yes, so they figured it was the guy's partner and had started to decompose. It was covered with a blanket and wearing a seatbelt, safety first. And investigators say there's no evidence of criminality. Tolling and parking tickets found in the car suggest the driver may have been chauffeuring his deceased partners to various locations before being discovered, including visits to Madrid, Villafranca, Del Penedès, and even Italy, despite travel restrictions because of the pandemic. The driver is currently only charged with traffic offenses. He told police the deceased man was his partner, whom he loved very much. But he gave conflicting reasons as to why he was driving on the wrong side of the road. The mystery thickens.
Well, to that driver, we offer our condolences on the death of your partner.
Yes.
And, people grieve in all different ways.
Yes,
and
they do.
This is a little on the complicated grief spectrum, but we still offer our condolences.
Well, road trip. So, for that, please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org for a link for this recipe of the decomposing body and other recipes and additional resources for this program. You can email us all your secrets at mail@everyonedies.org. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Most of the planet does. It would be super duper helpful if you would also remember to rate and review this podcast. As a nonprofit organization, we are always thrilled to accept your donations. Please go to our webpage to donate and support our work.
So today, in our second half, we're going to tell you a little bit about what a pet doula is, and then we're going to talk with a pet doula. So a pet doula memorializes animals when they die. So a doula is, origins are in the birth experience. A doula is someone who helps a woman give birth to a child and or a pet. And so a doula in just a normal conversation in terms of death and dying is somebody who is at the bedside with the person and the family at the end of life. And we're going to be doing a show about that coming up.
Yeah, and
we've talked about it in the past too.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have a birth doula, and now doulas at the end of life. Our death is a death doula. And people, people take classes on this, and it's growing. It's a growing industry. Yes.
A pet doula, though, does the same thing that a doula for humans does with pets, to honor the pet with the owner. Pets are a reservoir of love, and they're our family, and oftentimes people like their pet way better than they like people in their own family.
Absolutely.
And so the pet doula provides the ritual to honor the pet in their death. So some rituals that you can consider after your pet has died, you could put up a picture with some candles so that you see them every day. You could have a party with friends and other animal caretakers who, share your love for your pet and celebrate your animal's life and laugh about good memories and have good cocktails, and you can even have bad cocktails and talk about your pet.
Yes.
You could write a letter to your animal telling them how much you love them and that you'll always think about them. And often writing is a really good way of getting our emotions, getting our feelings out. And sometimes you tell people to journal, they look at the journal like, I can't do that. But if you ask, we'll write a letter, that's an easier job. Consider adding some of their ashes to a piece of jewelry. You can Google this. There's a lot of places that offer these types of services. You can try painting a picture of your animal or journaling about the animal's life and writing about all your adventures together and do sort of a pet remembrance journal. So Charlie actually introduced me to Lucy Morganstern, so I'm going to let him introduce you to her. I'm sorry, Charlie, do you have something you wanted to say?
Yes, with that. Okay, so basically with Lucy, principally she's a violinist in the symphony orchestra at Lincoln Center, but she just created this pet doula where people go to her, and as Marianne was saying, just to help them transition from the loss of their pet. With it, I've listened to one of her seminars, and it was just fascinating, just how, as Marianne said, sometimes you love your pet more than your family, and but people, and there are many millions of pet lovers. You understand this. This is like losing a member of your family, and it was interesting just listening to people describe their grief. And here in New York, there are places where there's actually meetings for those grieving from the loss of their pets. We also discussed having insurance for your pets, just like you do with people, and the cost of a dying pet. Also, what Lucy told me about was if in a family there are 2 or 3 pets, is that a pet also senses this. We grieve, but that pets grieve as well, and that it's common with her work, that she reminds the pet owners, if there's another pet in the house, to pull that pet aside and just explain. You hold your pet. Maybe the pet seems lost. The pet has been barking a lot, because a loved one is missing. And I know in my case, when my son died, his dog, Brando. Brando was not a year old, and so when people were over, to pay their respects, Brando was going crazy, and I don't know. I suddenly remembered what Lucy had said about that. So I picked him up and went into my son's bedroom, and we just sat there, and I held Brando, and I explained to him, Michael's gone. Michael has died. And I just held him, and I don't know. I obviously don't understand the words I'm saying, but just holding him and, rocking him a little, just calmed him down, calmed me down too. But just remember that pets, well, and pet owners, this, pets feel that, they feel your pain, they feel your happiness, and so consider that also with your pets.
Now, didn't you tell me when Michael died that Lucy had told you to tell Brando that he'd still be taken care of? Wasn't that a part of?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that. Lucy. Let me see. How does she put it? I said all that to Michael's dog. We'll still be here for you. Be taken care. Gosh, I'm trying to remember everything now. But yeah, but it's it's part of her seminar. You'll be taken care of. Yeah, just basically that reassurance that. Yeah, that your pet is not forgotten. Yeah, exactly. That you'll still be right,
and that he'll be, that somebody's gonna love him and walk him and feed him and all of that. How is
right.
Brando doing now?
He's better, but he will still sometimes just suddenly start barking. And there's, well, you look around the apartment and nobody's there. So Michael's girlfriend, comes by sometimes, or just takes him to her apartment, and she reports the same thing, that and the same thing with Michael's mother, that it's there's no one around, and suddenly Brando just starts barking.
But there's stories in that Hello from Heaven, from last week's podcast, where they talk about dogs who will do that, and that the dog is sensing that the deceased is there, and they can see them and they can hear them.
Right. Yeah.
So
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. So.
Well, so I think that's a good example of the pet doula thing, is that that it's not just the death of the pet, but if there's a human death, having somebody talk to the pet, because we've talked to different people about the pet stuff, and they say they can understand. So explain it to them.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And again, like I said, maybe not specifically the words, but that emotion. Yes, they get it. They get it. Also with Lucy, please check out her webpage. It's called Ceremonies for Pets, and so look at some of her work, what she does, and just really fascinating.
She really is.
Yeah.
Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Lucy Morganstern. Now, Lucy is a violinist, a professional violinist who, before COVID, I guess we could say, played for the American Ballet Theater and the American Symphony Orchestra. She's, as I said, a professional violinist, a healer, and a pet doula. And so, welcome, Lucy. I'm so pleased that you're going to talk with us today.
Thank you.
So, what is a pet doula?
Well, I think this is kind of a new designation. What I do and want to do more of is to support people and their pets at the end of life, at that last chapter of life, when I feel that there's so little support for people going through this very terrible time with their pets. And so my hope is to assist people and their pets so that the death experience and the whole dying and death experience can be more fulfilling, more so that completion can occur, more loving, more peaceful, and I feel that unfortunately these days in our death-phobic society, people are very unprepared. People are unprepared for death of people, but I think especially with their pets, no one really wants to think about that end of life for pets. People, they don't want to think about that. It's too painful. I didn't. And so then I think what happens is that people get very unprepared. They're unprepared when that time comes. And then I think it's very, very stressful. And so what I do and what I hope to do more of is to support people, help them, guide them through that traumatic time. And I feel that in so doing, it can actually be a very fulfilling experience. And I think that afterwards, after death, the grieving process, I'm hoping, is alleviated somewhat because people have a chance to prepare for the death of their pet and do it in a more conscious way.
So how did you get involved in doing this? What motivated you to think about it in this way?
Well, it's actually been a development, and I guess years ago somebody asked me the question, well, how did you get started? I had to think back, and I think it really all boils down to, or it goes back to when I many years ago found two kittens outside of my parents' home in Brooklyn. They were abandoned, forlorn, flea-ridden little things, and I had a real epiphany when we took them. Everything changed for me, and I was just amazed at how deep my love for these animals were, and it changed me, and I think it set me on the course that I've been on. And what happened was that one of these kittens, when he was around a year old, died suddenly. We thought he might have been hit by a car. And my sister called to tell me this. I just felt like the grief was so unbearable. I just didn't know how I could stand it. And I started thinking about him and realized that in this 1 year, he had helped my family so much. This particular kitten was very joyful. He had a real joie de vivre, and he was gregarious, and he had a sense of humor, and he was an amazing being. And with the advent of these two kittens into my family's life, they really helped my family heal. We, at that point, were not getting along. And but because we shared the love of these cats, we started talking to each other, we laughed together, and we had this shared enjoyment and shared love of these beings. So when this cat died, his name was Goldie, when he died, I immediately went, I live in Manhattan, I got on the subway, went back to Brooklyn, and we had a funeral for Goldie. We buried him in the backyard behind the garage. And I think that was really the beginning. Over time, I started doing ceremonies for pets, memorial ceremonies for pets, and I was doing that. But then with the other brother, whose name was Blackie, he was a black and white cat. We didn't have very creative names for them. I'm sorry. We just based it on the way they looked. We had Blackie and Goldie. Blackie lived a long life, but he survived my parents. And my mother died in January, and I took Blackie to live with me. I had 2 cats too, and Blackie wasn't well. He was around 15 at that point, and he developed cancer of the mouth.
Mm.
And the vet was somehow they had failed to inform me that Blackie had cancer, believe it or not. They never got back to me about the test, but I brought him back because this problem was ongoing, and then when the vet told me that he had cancer, and he said, well, I could just put him to sleep right now. And I thought, no. And I happen to know that Blackie, through an earlier time in our lives, when the first time I actually communicated with an animal communicator, I had found out that Blackie did not want to be euthanized. And so
can I just pause you right there? What's an animal communicator?
Okay, so an animal communicator is a person who is a psychic and who can talk to animals, as it were, who knows what they are feeling and can communicate with them. And in this instance, I had brought Blackie with my mother to the vet for, I guess, a checkup, or maybe there was something going on with him. When we came back home, Blackie started avoiding me. My feelings were so hurt. What's going on? I love Blackie so much. I thought I loved him more than anybody, and I was very hurt that and it was obvious. I'd go into a room, Blackie would leave. I'd go looking for him, and I'd find him, and he would leave. And so I just thought, what happened? And so that was the first time, I guess, I knew somebody that knew of an animal communicator. So that was my first time speaking to somebody, and she told me that Blackie had said that he thought that when we brought him to the vet, we had brought him to be euthanized, and he did not. And he obviously did not want to be euthanized. So she cleared it up. I said, oh, no, that wasn't it. She cleared it up with Blackie, and then after that, everything was fine. So after that, I that was my introduction to animal communication. So then when Blackie had this diagnosis of cancer of the mouth, I had at that point I knew a number of animal communicators, some of whom were my friends, and I checked to see what did Blackie want. Well, Blackie was, believe it or not, enjoying life. I think because I was spoiling him. I was so happy to have him. I just wanted him to have everything I felt he hadn't had before. And he had his own room. I played music for him. He loved music. He had his own little bed. I got him flowers. You can't imagine. I was just so happy to have him. I wanted him to feel very loved. And I felt so bad because my parents had died within a year of each other, and it was so hard. And so then we went through hospice with Blackie because, even though I was prepared, if he changed his mind, I was prepared to have a vet come. But Blackie, he just went to the end. And in that's the other stream of my work, is that it was such a profound experience for me. It was very challenging and very hard, of course, to watch. And to be present with him. But, and it took a while. And Blackie, but every time I check in with Blackie was enjoying life. And so he died in his own time. And so that was my first experience with doing hospice for animals. And then after that, other of my animals, also when they got into that space of, last chapter of their life, I always asked them what they wanted, and they always chose to die naturally. So I had a number of experiences, and it was so, trying to think of the right word. It was a very, very spiritual experience. On the one hand, horrible to watch. On the other hand, something so amazing was going on a kind of a spiritual level, that my feelings about death really changed and about the dying process. So
how did they change?
Well, my mother had died in hospice at home, and she was very difficult. She was in a lot of pain, and then finally when we called hospice in, then she was, they gave her morphine, but it was just very difficult. Maybe also it was my mother, my best friend. I didn't want to lose her, and I knew she was suffering, and it was very, very hard. But the good news was that the hospice nurses were so wonderful and so helpful. So then 6 months, 5 months later, when Blackie developed cancer of the mouth, I only had my own parents' deaths to refer back to, and Dad had died in intensive care. So I wasn't with him when he died. But then going through this process with Blackie, who was unafraid and was savoring life, enjoying life, it was like a revelation to me. And I could see that on the one hand, something horrible was going on, and that was the cancer as it developed. But then on the other hand, something beautiful was happening, and that was this big presence in my apartment. And I saw Blackie, who had, I have to admit, been kind of a difficult cat. He was kind of irritable, and in many ways, he'd become my dad's cat. He kind of took after my dad in both good and bad. But Dad was, could be quick-tempered and irritable, and Blackie was like that too. But I watched all of this fall away. All of this, his whole personality, it's almost like it fell away, and what happened instead was this presence, which I didn't really know what to call, his spirit, his soul. Maybe it's the true essence of who Blackie really became more and more present, and it was so inspiring. And I wasn't the only one who noticed this. When people came over, they also noticed this. So, and then a year later, one of my other cats developed. It was horrible. She developed the exact same cancer, and then we had to go through it all again, except this time knowing what it was like. And she had been a fearful cat. She wasn't like Blackie. Blackie was somebody called him the old general. But my cat was much more of a fearful cat. And I thought, oh my gosh, how's it going to be for her? Well, she also chose to die naturally. And again, I saw the same thing happened. All the fear, all the timidity, the whole personality aspect of her just melted away, and instead this beautiful, beautiful presence rose. And and I've been, over time, as other of my animals died, I saw that same thing happening. And so my feelings about death changed. I thought, perhaps we misunderstand death. Maybe there are gifts that come with death because we come from a society that is death phobic and doesn't want to look at death. We try to put death behind us. We try to avoid death. We do everything we can to prolong life and put off dying. And it started occurring to me that maybe we were missing out because we weren't flowing in the process. We were resisting the process. And so my feelings have really changed and evolved. And so now, in terms of what I would like to do for people, I know how difficult it is. It is so hard when your beloved, possibly soulmate, is dying. And all sorts of feelings come up. And then you also have to make decisions most of the time. You have to deal with vets. You have to decide what course of action to take. And maybe you don't feel prepared to be making these decisions. And so then there's so much anxiety. There's anxiety and fear of loss and grief. And then I also feel then, unfortunately, then we're not there for our animals either in the way that we could be, because they're so sensitive to the way we feel. And
do
so
you think it's something in the American culture that says, well, we'll just take them to the vet and have them put down rather than going through and allowing natural death?
I don't know how it is in other countries. I assume it's somewhat the same. And I understand why people want to do that. We don't want our pets to suffer. Mm-hmm. But I think that sometimes pets perhaps are not suffering. Maybe they're uncomfortable. But I mean, but I'm not against euthanasia. If an animal really is suffering, then I think that is the kind thing to do. But in the case of my animals, it didn't get to that extreme, and so they were uncomfortable, but still there was something else going on. And so I have, for a long time I was very pro-hospice because I had had such wonderful experiences with it. But over time I've come to realize that at times euthanasia is also the right thing to do. But if people are going to do that, again, I've seen when people are unprepared, and let's say they bring their animal to the vet, and the vet says your animal is suffering, and well, people don't want their pets to be suffering, and then maybe they feel like they have no choice but to have their animal euthanized then, but they're not ready. And then I think it can be extremely traumatic afterwards. I've seen it. I've experienced this with people. So that's another reason why I really want to be there for people, to help them to move through this process with grace. And then if it comes to the fact that maybe the animal will be euthanized, at least have a chance to say goodbye to your pet.
Right.
To explain to your pet what's going to be happening.
Or even stay with the pet, because I know in a lot of vets, they just take them away. And
right.
You're not with them.
Actually, that happened to me. That happened to me.
Oh, did it?
The last, I guess it was my last cat who died, Ursula. She was dying. I brought her to the vet that day simply to see if they would hydrate her, because she hadn't been drinking, and I thought maybe it would make her feel more comfortable. And the vet said, I can't even do that. I think that, that could kill her. And, we're talking for a while, and I said, well, I guess it came to it. She said, why don't I just take her in the back? I could just put her to sleep. Why don't I just take her to the back? And I said, no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take her home. And if I feel like she's suffering or she's starting to suffer, then I will have a vet come to the home and put her to sleep at home. And then amazingly, as I'm about to leave the veterinary office, the phone rings, and it's my friend who's an animal communicator, and she and I have been very much in touch about Ursula. Mm-hmm. And I said, Ray, I'm at the vet, and the vet wanted to put Ursula to sleep. Ask Ursula, what does she want? What does Ursula want? And Ray said, Ursula says she wants to go home. So I brought Ursula home, and she died the next day. But the time that we had at home was so precious. It was so beautiful. People came and said goodbye to her. A dear friend of mine who particularly loved Ursula came over to sit with her, to meditate. And this friend was there when Ursula left. And her death was very, very peaceful and very, very beautiful. And, You know, and when I think about how it could have been if I had let the vet bring Ursula to the back and just put her to sleep there, and what actually happened, which was so beautiful, and I don't know, it just it was so peaceful, and so these are you know these are some of my experiences, but I think it's just dependent upon every person, every animal, every situation, that you need to find what is the best way of working with it. And my hope is to bring some peace into the process.
Well, and also part of with humans is part, like our at Everyone Dies, is that understand what your options are, right? As people, what are your options? Well, that's also true with your pets. What are your options? If you aren't aware that there's any other option than to have your pet taken to the back and being put to sleep, then you don't really know any better than to say, oh, okay, right? But if you know that there's pet hospice, or I had a black lab when my kids were young, and he started to have seizures, and the vet said, these dogs, he's embarrassed to be having these seizures. He doesn't like it. It's stressful. It's suffering for him. And he said he needs to be put down. And I said, I don't want him. I was a hospice nurse at the time. I said, I don't want him dying here. And he said, I can give you the medication and give it to him rectally, and he can go to sleep in your own house. And so that's what we did. And we looked at picture books of him all throughout the girls' lives up to that point, and talked to him and talked to the girls, and just was with him, all the way through the end. And then one of our neighbors dug a big hole because he was a big old dog, and I was going to pay him, and he said, no, that's for Lincoln. And so we had a funeral, and it was good for the kids, and it was good for us, and it was good for Lincoln. But if I hadn't asked, can I have the medication? Can I do it a different way than what you're suggesting? That's how it would have turned out, of being taken in the back. And so I think for our listeners, is ask a different question. Is there another way? Are you willing to have it be a different way?
I think that's wonderful. I think when my impression is, I'll just say that my impression is that for most vets, or many vets, hospice is not really an option. Although, you know what, it's starting now. Some more alternative vets, of course there weren't that many of them. I think now hospice is actually starting to come in as an option. But I think for many, they don't consider dying at home. Maybe they consider it cruel. But I have had enough experience to know that it is not cruel when your animal is loving you and loving life and dying, but in their own time, in their own way. I think I like to ask the animal, honestly. I mean, I do go through animal communicators. I usually get it right.
Do you?
I'm pretty intuitive. I usually get it right, but I always check. I want to know what they want, and of course I'm with them. And the other thing that I do want to say, I know we'll probably have to end pretty soon, is that it's just terribly important that people have support during this last period. Mm. There is not enough support for people. It is so excruciating going through this. And so I really encourage people to reach out and find people who can support you through this process, because it is hard. And a lot of times people don't feel that they can talk about how much they love their pets and how much they are suffering at the thought that their pets are going to be dying. They don't feel, not quite kosher to talk about it. But I really encourage people to talk about it.
Do you know the concept of disenfranchised grief?
I do know that, yes. Yes, I do.
So for our listeners, disenfranchised grief is, feeling sad about something that people wouldn't necessarily say you should feel sad about, like if your ex-husband dies or, somebody that's, not necessarily related, but it's a loss. And I think that losing your pet is part of that disenfranchised grief. It's like, well, your pet was euthanized, okay, get back to work. And we don't say, well, let's send a sympathy card or tell me about your pet or any kind of acknowledgement of what a tremendous loss that is. But that's a member of your family. That's when I got my kids are 13 months apart, girls, and they were in high school and they were going through that period where I'd come in from work and they weren't happy to see me and they weren't, teenage girls can be not necessarily nice. And I got a dog. And they said, dog. And I said, because I want somebody to be happy to see me when I walk in the door. And Harley was it, and he still is happy to see me. Every time I walk in the door, I could walk out the back door and walk in the front door, and he's still happy to see me. But, it's like why you got that pet in the first place, the associations, like with your cats at your parents' house and that association with your family and that feeling of we feel good together because of these cats, all of that goes with it. And then to just say, well, they died, move on, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem even possible. We need to be able to grieve our pets and perhaps people acknowledge it. Now you do, I don't know, is it proper to say pet funerals or pet memorials?
Yeah,
what is it that you do?
I do. Well, I call them ceremonies. It depends on, the circumstances. But I used to call them memorial services. Then I changed it to ceremonies. But when one of my cats died, I actually had a party for her. This cat had lived in a small room in my apartment when I first got her because she was kind of wild and attacking my other cat. So that was her room. And then later on, I started renting out that room. And this cat, Lily, would come to visit the people who were in the room. And I said, Lily thinks I would tell them, Lily thinks this is her room. And so many people passed through that room and became friends with Lily. Lily was a dear friend of these people. So after she passed, I actually had a party. And I invited her former roommates to this party so we could celebrate. We could celebrate Lily, and so it depends. But I agree with you, and I feel that with the relationship we have with our pets can be so deep, so loving, so profound, and I feel we should honor them. We should honor them when they die. In one way or another, I do encourage ceremonies, but it could even be a conversation with somebody, talking to somebody about how much you loved your pet, and maybe they knew your pet and they loved them too. But sharing, it could be writing a poem. But I feel that they should be honored just as we honor people when they die.
Yeah.
I feel we should honor the animals, and I feel that was just kind of a forgotten piece.
So what do you do in your ceremonies?
Well, I create ceremonies and I work with the person whose pet it was. And we create what is I kind of through them get to know the animal, and I get to know the person, and then it's like what resonates, what's that? And I feel that creative process of creating the ceremony. I mean, just to give you some for instances, and we talk about pet read. A lot of times, I have some beautiful poems that I like to read. I'm a violinist. Almost all of ceremonies, if not all, I have played a piece. Usually, many times, most of the time, I would improvise because I had that gift. So I kind of in the spirit of the animal in that moment, I would create a musical piece. So I would play. Incredible. And, it could be, it really could be anything that feels right. And I feel that process of creating the ceremony is part of the healing process too. Mm-hmm. So I don't have a stock ceremony that I do.
Mm-hmm. It's personalized.
And I spend a lot of time kind of communing beforehand. I live with the ceremony before we have it, because I just find it so profound. I find love of animals so profound, such a profound thing, and I'm so happy that people are now starting to recognize how deep these relationships go.
Yes. Now, what do you have for pets now?
In terms of,
do you have cats?
Oh, you mean COVID?
No,
it hasn't. Well, recently, actually, what's happened is I have been more involved in helping a number of my friends. Their pets died recently, and I have been doing a lot of counseling and sharing and just trying to be there. Mm-hmm. Just trying to be there for most of these people were my friends. One was somebody that had attended a talk that I gave and had contacted me. But I really do my best to just be there for people, knowing that people lack support, and I feel like that's something I can give.
And so if our listeners want to get in touch with you, you have a website. It's called ceremoniesforpets.com. That's www.ceremoniesforpets.com. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about this. And I know that you do a lot of other kinds of work, so hopefully be willing to chat with us again in the future. And our guest is Lucy Morganstern, and her website is www.ceremoniesforpets.com.
And with that, thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete.
I'm Marianne Matzo, and we look forward to talking with you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.